order. This special meeting was called by the Finance Committee of Massillon City Council for the purpose to discuss and possibly pass ordinance number 74, 2022. Roll call.
Creamer.
Present.
Gregg.
Here.
Harvey Smith. Here. Kern King.
Here.
Lewis.
Present.
Lombardi.
Here.
Sloops.
Here.
Sneed.
Here.
And Barrett.
Present.
Roll call, 9 present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We also have in attendance with us the following city officials.
Mayor Kathy Casano Perry. Safety Service Director Barb Sylvester.
Present.
Auditor Jane Ferraro.
Here.
Chief, let me see. Law Director Justin Richards.
Present.
Chief Counsel Bill Bartos.
Present.
Civil Engineer Greg McHugh.
Here.
Economic Development Director David Maley.
Present.
We also have in attendance with us the Honorable Judge Eddie Elam and the Honorable Judge Joel Victor. Is there anyone else from administration I might have missed? That's it, Madam President.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. We will take remarks from delegations and citizens to matters on the agenda. If anyone wishes to speak, please come forward, state your name, address, and topic you wish to discuss, and please limit your comments to 4 minutes or less. Seeing none, we'll move into ordinance number 74, 2022.
An ordinance making certain appropriations from the unappropriated balance of the 1238 Probation Service Fund for the year ending December 31st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Lewis.
Yes, this is legislation that we were able to put on our agenda for last week's meeting. There's a few areas I just want to point out as we work through this. One, I did speak with President Eisnick last week. One element of this that I thought was a little bit foggy, and I thought we needed to address as far as giving better guidance to our clerk. And that would be that legislation requests that come to council that are not from the administration still need to make it to council for review. From my understanding of what's been told to me, the request was made, it was sent over to administration, and it got removed or something at that point. And that's why we didn't see it in time. Fortunately, the auditor and the judge were able to notify us, and we were able to get some verbals and get it on the agenda for last week so we could still address it. But as we see, it put us in a situation where none of us had information and made it hard for us. So that was one thing. The merits of this appropriation itself, I want to start off with one. As far as funding it, absolutely, 1238 Probation Services Fund are funds that are the court's monies. We are simply, they're ordering it, but it is the way that they have to speak, sort of say, and let us know that they need those funds for whatever project or programming that they are doing. And as I said, it is their money and we just appropriate it for them as an additional step. So the question isn't so much on the funding side of it. Is their money? We do this all the time and we just pass it through. So I don't think that is an issue in my opinion. And on the merits itself, as the way this ordinance is written, or this legislation would be written, that's exactly what it's saying. The court is saying we need $60,000 out of this fund that was not appropriated in the budget, and we're just asking you to do so. Okay? There are a couple additional questions that did come up from last week's meeting. One was the $50,000 and the bid process. I believe maybe I'll call the law director up here in a moment and he can explain a little bit that to you. But a quick summation of that, and why we were questioning it, because the question was, does the court still have that same threshold as other departments or branches of the government may have within the city? And while that question I didn't quite get a solid answer on, where we did end up landing is that the building that was renovated that caused the need for this appropriation is actually under the purview of the Safety Service Director, as it is a city-owned building, and all city-owned buildings fall under the purview of the Safety Service Director. It should be coordinated with them when there's any kind of meaningful change she does fall into the 50,000. So a project that is going to be more than 50,000 should be bid out because it's under her purview. Which brings me to the last question, which we might get an answer of tonight is, how does this remodel impact the remodel that council and the administration already approved late last year? It looks like a lot of this is somewhat cosmetic and may end up getting tore out anyways here in a couple of months when the other model comes through. So that's a big question I have as well. Madam President, I would like to call for the law director or his representative. That's okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Martos.
Everybody hear? Yes. Good, okay. So you repeat the question.
Just, do you want to give us some indication of your findings? First off, he's allowed to speak.
Thank you, I appreciate it. As far as I think the initial question was regarding the bid process. I think everybody should have received an updated order from the court that brought that number down so that it does not exceed, the expenditure will no longer exceed $50,000. So the bid threshold is actually a moot point at this point. But you did, your summary is an accurate one. We have here what is a city building, it's owned by the city of Massillon. The safety service director has inherent authority over the construction and maintenance of all city buildings. At the same time, we have a special court fund that is allowed to be used for not only the purchase of new facilities, but the upgrade of existing facilities. So it's kind of a gray area in the revised code, but I think it's clear that the safety service director plays a role in this, and at the same time, the courts can order these funds appropriated. So now that the $50,000 threshold is no longer an issue, I think the council has no problem here to moving forward, or at least that's the recommendation of the law director. In our analysis, that the bid threshold is no longer an issue. We have an order from the court per chapter 19 of the revised code to disperse the funds, and so no issues with the bid order per chapter 19, and so everything seems to be in line with the revised code at this point. So moving forward, we probably suggest a different pathway and for joint projects of this nature, and I think the safety service director and the judges will have those discussions in the future. But if our counsel is necessary, we'll be more than happy to give it at that time.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bartos?
The only suggestion I have is perhaps an amendment to the pending resolution, given that the order that you now have before you is order is judgment entry 45/2022. You see the emergency language references, I believe, order 38/2022. The judge revoked that order, and so just to make reference, judge, that the correct order, I think it's 45/2022, and so that would be the correct 45/2022 appears to be the correct order, referencing the 48/163 for the project. So that's my understanding. That's the final invoice, and so that brings us to that 50,000 amount does not exceed that amount, which is the key language, as I mentioned, in 735.05 of the revised code, which is that bid threshold section for the safety service director, but we merge those two. Thank you.
Anyone? Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. We did invite the judge and the court here tonight, so give them an opportunity to speak if they'd like to. Want to talk about the project at all or answer any questions?
If you could come forward, Judge Eaton, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis, Madam President. The court services building is under the jurisdiction of the Massillon Municipal Court, not the Safety Service Director. The city owns, this council chambers owns the courtrooms and owns the buildings. The Massillon Court has never asserted any ownership over anything. I shared with Law Director Richard and Chief Law Director Bartos the statutory authority with the court has sole jurisdiction over its facilities, not the safety service director. That's a separation of powers issue. For the record, I'm going to enter a court order journal entry number 105-2020, filed November 6th of 2020, that establishes the court services building. There were some cosmetic things, Councilman Lewis, but we needed a jury room, probation offices, and this will not impact anything else because Safety Service Director Sylvester and Judge Fichter, Law Director Richard were in consultation of placing the restrooms somewhere else. It's not going to be in the building. We're using that entire building. For the record, how do I enter this, Diane? Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Anyone have questions for Judge Elam?
I had a great discussion with Mr. Bartos and Law Director Richard. I got 2 letterhead bids. One was at $62,000, the other is $48,000. We went for the $48,000. The reason it exceeded $50,000 is there were change orders directed by the city. They wanted extra things there, an exit light and security lights in the garage. Once we got into the building, we realized, because we took the city down, the ceiling down, it was an absolute mess up there. Mike, you've been over there yourself before and after. So these change orders came in. The other thing is, when they bid the carpet, as you know, the supply chain is a mess. We couldn't get the carpet. We wanted to match this carpet that's in the courtrooms, and it's in city council chambers, that the court put in here. Leave this entire city council chambers. No one told me to bid it back then when we did this, the courtrooms, the law department, and downstairs. Everything was done. I had help through Greg, the engineer's office. So after we had to ramp up and get additional new carpet, it was better than the carpet here. That's what exceeded the $50,000. And the addition of cutting out all the radio wires that were in there, all the unused electrical wires that were in there, and all the conduit was in there. And installing, pursuant to what the Safety Service Director wanted, an electrified exit light and security lights in the garage. So that's why it's over. The bid was 48 something. It went over because of the additional carpeting, some change orders. There isn't a project this city has ever done where there hasn't been a change order, where it has exceeded the original contract price, either more or less. You do that in your residence all the time. You find different things when you get the contractor in there to add while the contractor's there. So I just wanted to make sure everybody realized that original contract was not over $50,000 whatsoever. It's through the change orders of the city and the building that was a mess to begin with that we cleaned up. I want to take you back 12 to 13 years ago when that building was under 2 inches of water. The only building permit that was ever taken out in that building was the one I took out when I put a new roof on that building. APA, the FBI, the Massillon Police Department, nobody ever took a building permit out in that building in all the configurations that we had to deal with and the mess that they left in the ceiling. It's better today than it was. So when I leave office, it's better than we found it. So the next court can use that for probation officers, a jury room, and an emergency management center that the Safety Service Director so graciously tied into the backup generator. So I want to dispel everything that everybody thinks that Elam went out on a lark and redid this thing for $52,000. Okay? So if there's any questions, I'd be free to answer.
Anyone? Councilman Lewis?
I do have a couple questions. I don't know how that conversation is going to go. One, I do see on the bid here the emergency exit lights that you mentioned and the LED lighting in the Damage Center you did mention. Both of them come out combined about $800, so those are on there. But my question is, it seems, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the funding. I'm not taking any objection to passing the appropriation nights. Core monies that you have to pass through. But this highlights another fundamental issue we have, and that is that the city has said, we're gonna do like a $1.2 million renovation on this building, and you just said, it's not your building to do that, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah, and it's the city of Massillon's building, but it's a court facility. So you're not gonna touch it, it's a court facility.
And that brings me to my question from the law director's office. Where does that leave us? So now we have a city-owned building that the legislature and the administration do not have authority to do anything to. The court's just going to take it over.
Oh, Ed, we've had it for 12 years.
Okay, but who originally bought
Well, they're the same people that bought the courtrooms, same people who bought the city council.
It's still a city building.
I have never disputed that.
So where do we fall with that? Do we have any insight on that? Do we have $1.2 million hanging out
Mr. Chairman, the law department stands by its initial statement. This is a city building. Municipal courts are creatures of statute. They have only those powers presented under the chapter 1901 of the Ohio Revised Code. This is not a Title III courthouse, like a county courthouse. These are municipal buildings under the city of Massillon that are provided as suitable accommodations for the municipal court as required under, once again, 1901 of the Ohio Revised Code. So we stand by our analysis. This is, obviously we have a disagreement here, and perhaps future, written opinions may be necessary, but at this point, for the purposes of this meeting tonight, bid threshold issue is moved. We have an order before you by the court. So it's our recommendation to pass this piece of legislation. If further discussions need to be had, or more formal communications need to be had, they can be had. But we stand by our opinion and our analysis of the law.
So in summary, where we're at right now is we have your opinion. I'm sure when I call Ms. Sylvester up, their opinion will be, we could make the improvements that we have designed to make. We would still allow for access to the building to be able to operate within the building as previously agreed upon. That's our side. The court side is, it's our building, you're not coming in and doing anything.
It's not our building, it's our facility, Ed. I told you, I don't own the building. We've been maintaining that building for the last 11 to 12 years. We use it for court functions, for probation officers, a jury room. We decided that when I discussed with Director Sylvester moving the wall, the two contractors we talked to said would disrupt the court. We decided we're not going to do it. We've given Director Sylvester many other alternatives.
We use the building too, though, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I took Mr. Maley through it the other day to show them how they can use the monitors instead of the TV screen. You have 4 commissions or boards that meet there. We're glad we can do that, so you don't have to open this building at night for security reasons.
Do you see where I understand where you're coming from, and trying to keep this as respectful as possible, but do you see where my conflict that I'm having is coming from is when I hear you saying, we're happy to let you.
No,
It's my building. You're not letting me use my building. We're using our building. Does that make sense?
I respect Diane and City Council. I don't turn this into a courtroom Monday through Friday. You're not going to turn my building into restrooms. These restrooms are solely for Duncan Plaza. They're not for the court facility. We are fine with restrooms. I'm saying, if you look at the schedule I put out, I've always put out Massillon boarding commissions. They have a key. There's never been a time where we've denied access. Even during the construction period, we made reasonable accommodation for every boarding commission there. We provide security for that building during the time that they're there at 4:30 to 6. So there's never a point. Now, if you said that this place was under reconstruction, we would allow you to use our courtroom for city council chambers. We have totally cooperated in every respect in the 26 years I've been judge to cooperate with the city as an equal partner. You can't pass a piece of legislation that infringes upon the ability of the court to operate. And there's enough AG's opinions, Attorney General opinions I gave to Mr. Marcus and Law Director Richard to show that. But if you want to use the building, you can always use it. It's free access. The Director of Public Safety has a key.
I will say that I have spoken with Judge Elam a couple of times in the past. We've had some good conversations. It's always been very nice, just like this one. But I think we probably need a little bit more conversations. Obviously, we're finding ourselves in a bit of an inroads and somewhat not necessarily paying right to this specific legislation. So I don't know if anybody else has questions.
Councilman Thayer?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm trying to decide if this is somewhere between semantics and I don't know what. Maybe if I break it down Barney style for me, as the kids say. Like any other business, there may be a building owner and then a business owner, and they're separate entities. Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, I've never disputed ownership, Councilman Thayer. Same thing with the courtrooms, with the probation officers. They're all owned by the city of Massillon. We don't have the ability to own property. If many of you want to know, if you've been down to the Ohio State Horseshoe, the football stadium, that is not owned by the Ohio State University. That is owned by the state of Ohio for the use and benefit of the Ohio State University.
Yeah.
Okay? Same thing here. The court services building was used in many other instances when Councilman Sleuth was a police officer. They had an FBI task force that was used by APA. Everybody left it a mess. We went in and cleaned it up. And it serves the court very well. It's better to use that building than order this body to appropriate a couple $1 million to build another building because we're out of space. I need 3 more probation officers. I need another courtroom, which we have now over there. So we need a bigger jury room. I can't put jurors in a room that's 9 by 12, especially with the COVID implications and everything else. So we have made that handicap accessible. It's as large, half the size of this room right here. It's worked out very well over the years. What we did is made it more efficient for the city by putting LED lighting in and automatic switches that go on and off. So I'm just at loss to know why the administration wants to infringe upon the efficient operation of the courts.
And to me, it serves a reason too. We can't go into any business to do the same thing. We can't order them to shut down while we fix a building. Well, actually, we did, I guess, downtown. I'm just trying to put pieces together and make a little bit of sense for me. But I do understand what you're saying. In no way, shape, or form should we ever infringe upon the operation of courts. I mean, that's obvious that should never be done. My only question is, I guess, how we avoid this from ever happening again, or getting it in sort of some sort of contested financing of this. The court has their money; they spend it as they need, and the city has money that they spend as they need. I'm not really sure what the big issue is here, but I do appreciate you trying to explain.
Well, let me put it in perspective. Thank you, Councilman Thayer. The court has spent over $1.5 million in this building alone. We don't occupy city council chambers. I don't occupy downstairs. I put security down there for the whole building. I never said, this is my building. We have the ability to do that. And everything I spend in computers and special projects, I do not come to this body and ask you to use general revenue taxpayer funds. We have the people who use the court pay for the court. We assess a fee, a special projects fee, a So those are all paid by the people who use the court. And that's how it should be. And I'll continue to do that to better this facility and the court services.
Councilman Lewis?
I am going to ask for the Secret Service Director, but for the sake of transparency, Judge, I'm not trying to pick a fight, but when you move security down the stairs, yes, you did it for the whole building, but you follow that up with about a 50% budget increase in the very next budget cycle. So some of that did get passed on to the city.
I did, the first 2 years it did.
I just wanted, these guys want to be, so I wanted to just be transparent.
Oh, I
The
absolutely.
city does do some part in maintaining and helping with the building.
You know, you're right, Councilman Lewis, but you don't manage it, you don't hire. I deal with the headaches that goes on down there. We've taken that away from you. I think if you ask everybody in the building, it's worked out real well.
No one else has a question, I'll just answer.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Bartos. Ms. Sylvester, if you could come up.
Good evening.
Secret Service Director Sylvester, you were aware that the judge was making renovations in the building?
Well, when we had a meeting, the meeting that I spoke of, that was on January the 13th, he made mention of doing some cleanups and a few updates in the building at that time.
That was January 13th.
Yes, and we met with Judge Victor and Judge Elam.
When did you become aware of the size of the project, how much it from that 50,000 possible level?
Basically not until the request for legislation came through.
The only reason I follow that up is because while a lot of this has to do with the sensitivity of the building, as we were talking with the judge, and I was curious as to why council wasn't made aware of this in advance. Because some of this is a shock value too. You know, unfortunately, the judge and I have had to talk to each other a few times in the evening trying to weed our way through this because of some of the shock value. And I was curious if you guys were aware, how come we would never meet?
We were, because the changes have not completely been met. Again, as I told you last week, we've been trying to work to make sure that anything and every agency that needs to have meetings in that building is going to be accommodated. And as all of you know, I presented to you the forms that were given to us from Judge Victor and Judge Elam quite some time back, where they both signed off and had 11 items that they wanted us to conform to. We agreed to all of that. We're going to do all of that. And then a court order came that we were not able to go into the building and do any work. So again, I asked for a meeting with the judges because, again, I want to work with everyone. I want to make sure that we are accommodating everyone. And most importantly, I want to make sure that the building is safe.
When did that court order come to you?
It was, we discussed it earlier this year. I don't remember the exact date that was on that, but it was prior to, or the end of last year, prior to our meeting. No, it was at a meeting in January. And we discussed it, and Judge Elam brought another copy of the order with him. So again, we were trying to make accommodations at that time, and that's when Judge Elam and Judge Victor and I went into the back waiting room, and Judge Elam actually had some new ideas of making some changes there. So again, it's not, council did appropriate the money, gave us the authority to go out to bid, but nothing was completely changed yet at that point as to what was going to be happening. Again, in all of my attempts to accommodate the judges and their needs for that building. And all of the other meetings that we have in there. We do have, the zoning board, planning commission, historic preservation commission, civil service.
And I believe, and I could be wrong, but earlier this year we passed a CDBG budget or something of that nature that included funding for the guest building. Is that correct?
The request to go out to bid actually was November of last year. Now, the change, what you've probably seen from CDBG is because of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Their fiscal year is from January 1, so they always have to come back to the council because they have to close out all of their POs.
We had to do that in January.
Correct.
And see, that's kind of where I'm getting a little frustrated right now, is the judge makes a court order saying you're not able to do the improvements. And then we have a funding source through CDBG that comes in front of council. We're never made aware that the judge is contending it. You know, contending us even being able to go in there and do the improvements. I guess what I'm getting at, to put it bluntly, it seems like a pissing match between a couple different people. Council was left in the dark until last Monday, and all of a sudden there's a $50,000 bill that had to be paid. And now we're finding out that the judge is making, I'm going to assume, valid legal arguments and claims for the use of the property. The city's making valid legal use and claims for the use of the property. And this has been going on for 3 months. Council's sitting out there drinking their coffee and eating their crumpets and got no idea that you guys doing this. And now we're stuck in the middle.
Well, sorry you feel that way, but again, that's not, my fault. Yeah, the council has, you are in control of the funds and the funding, and that is in place. But again, I'm trying to make the accommodations for everybody, trying to make the building safe, I'm trying to make it ADA compliant, trying to have the restrooms in there for the Duncan Plaza. Everyone on council is well aware of that. So again, and my position is to, first of all, the safety of everyone in this community. And that's definitely what I'm trying to do. And by the same token, as public officials, all of you are responsible for following the federal, the state, and the local laws, and so am I. And that's exactly what I'm trying to follow and doing that too. But again, wanting to make it so that it works for everybody, for every agency. And I'm sure Judge Victor and Judge Ewan will agree to that. I mean, I have made myself available to them. They're changing their dates. I'm willing to change the dates. So it's not anything that, again, until something's finalized, I don't really know that I could update you at that point in time. So I'm just trying to work with everybody. Councilman Lewis.
Thank you. I'll open up for any other questions.
Councilman Gray?
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want to thank Judge Ewan for coming before the council today and being available to answer questions on this issue. I wasn't here last week. I'm not sure what I missed regarding this, but I do have one question. As we've talked about, we passed legislation last year appropriating money to do a complete renovation of the Getz building, including moving the wall and things like that. Where does that stand now?
Well, as I said, I was given a court order to not go into the room. The only real issue out of the 11 items, again, was not wanting to move the wall 6 inches, and Judge Victor was at that meeting, Greg McHugh was at that meeting. So, that's, when it was changed, that it, shouldn't be able to do that in that building then. So that's when we began to look at the other ideas that Judge Ewan had for us.
So that legislation allowed the project to go out to bid. Has it gone out to bid?
It is not.
So it sounds like we're at a stalemate.
Correct. As I said, I am trying to accommodate everyone. That's exactly what I was trying to do. So as I told Councilwoman Creamer last week, didn't want to have delays. But again, I am trying to accommodate everybody.
Sure.
And for the use of the building, and like I said, again, the building safety. And again, when you do talk about the building itself, it is a public building. We are required, to have it ADA compliant, just like with this building, just like with this council approved everything for our doors downstairs, our restrooms up here. So, that's another part of the project, as well as, again, the safety piece that comes with it.
Right. I very much appreciate you having an extremely difficult job in this particular instance, especially. But I share Councilman Lewis's frustration that this has just come to a head recently, when this was obviously an issue that has been an issue for several months, or at least a few months. So, other than that,
Well, I'll just repeat again, I'm trying to accommodate, the needs that they brought forward to me, and accommodate their schedules of when they said that they could meet with me. So, again, my timeline is there. This council passed to go out to bid in November. It's the date of the legislation. It was shortly after the first of the year that I contacted both judges to have the first meeting in January. and that meeting we did have. And then I did also speak with Judge Young on March the 15th as well about the change plan that he had brought forward to us.
Thank you.
Councilman Lombardi?
Thank you, President Eisner. I just have a comment here that, I appreciate what Judge Elam has said tonight, and I appreciate what you've said tonight, and I appreciate the opinion and positions you're both in. However, I have to agree here that a project of this magnitude that you're using taxpayer money for, and we have these types of changes, and over months, council was never made aware that there were changes to the project or any type of strong blockages or anything to get the project off the ground. I think that, because I'm sitting here now, and what I'm imagining is we've passed $1.5 million for the upgrades to this building, and only part of those upgrades are now going to happen. Okay.
I need to make a correction. What you approved, this council approved is $250,000.
Okay. If we put a dollar, it doesn't matter. We're using public money. I think you need to be a little bit more transparent to the people who are helping you to fund these projects. Okay, $250,000 is nothing to sneeze at. Okay.
Right.
So if we put $250,000 into an approval for a project for this building, not all of the renovations that you claimed were going to happen are going to happen now, correct?
Well, we haven't finalized again. I've been trying to accommodate the judges. And from the November date that you gave us to March, that's not really that long of a period of time. Again, for us, we met in January, we would meet again in March. Judge Victor was out on medical. So we did have a meeting scheduled actually for last Tuesday, which was also rescheduled now by the judges. So, it's not as if that I haven't tried to do that, but again, to come back to council and say, we don't have a plan finalized yet. I would think that this council would appreciate, their time, your time, and my time, that we would have something finalized when I would bring something back to council.
Well, I
At
think
this point,
council's
we
got a
don't,
problem with
because
being
we're-
blindsided on this.
Well, again, at that point, I'm assuming you're saying I should come and tell you that a court order was given to me, but I've also now been told by our law department that the court order is invalid, which, again, didn't know at that time. So, it's not anything that, this council wasn't going to be made aware of, it's that it hasn't been finalized at this point, a change, if there's a change. And the building still needs to be made sure that it is ADA compliant. And also for the record, there were no change orders that were issued by me or my office for the work that was recently done.
Councilman Barrett?
Thank you, Madam President. I had some questions and they got blurry, if that's possible. One of the thrusts of this renovation was ideally ADA compliance. You have to understand that was a huge part of the budget, was to bring the building up to this standard. So far with the renovations that are done, has any of that criteria been met? Did you know?
Not to my knowledge, no.
But, so the stalemate as it stands, we have this fund, whatever denomination you want to put on it, the cities and the CDBG is in limbo now until we figure out where to put it and how to spend it. Because we can't do what the original drawings from the architects that you hired wanted to do. So I don't even know how to ask the question after that. So if we have the money, we have a plan, but that plan can't work, where do we go now? We on plan B or C or somewhere down the road?
Correct. You can make a change to the plan that is completely acceptable through HUD as well as your CDBG dollars.
Okay.
for even, it's close for the HUD approval, basically.
Again, a big part of it was supposed to be some
Renovations and,
restrooms.
yeah, it's reservations and ADA restrooms, so,
for
yeah.
that, so. I know I asked the question before, and I don't like to beat a dead horse. Why weren't restrooms included in a facility we know where we wanted to plan for 2,000 people being there at any given moment? And if that were done, we wouldn't have this situation probably here now. So, and again, I know we can't go back and change all that, but again, it comes down to planning, as always. I guess it goes back to biblical times, you know, you're gonna build a tower, you have to make sure you have enough money to finish it, or before we end up looking like this. But I want this to come to some resolution, but right now, I'm not even sure where to go with it, and I hope we can work out something before too long. But thank you for helping us.
You're welcome.
Councilman Snead?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to say for the record that this council is not the one that passed the record because Councilwoman Julie Harvard Smith and myself were not on council when that went through last November, so we had no say. I think we need to amend the changes to that and get this contractor paid as soon as possible. Also, I'm the only council person that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that has been in that building on multiple occasions and seen what the judges have done. So, okay, the floor has been redone, the security lights have been done, any redundancy is just a waste of taxpayer money at this point. So we definitely, I would urge the administration and respectfully ask that from going forward, to make sure that we don't redo anything that's already been done.
And we will not.
Thank you.
Councilman Lewis?
Couple of things, from my perspective. One, and I'll get ready to make a motion to get this ball rolling. One, as far as it stands now, the city legislator, regardless of his last council or not, it's still law and in effect. We're all still pulled to it. So as it stands now, there is legislation that is authorizing the safety service director and the mayor to move forward with the upgrades and getting the bids and everything else on that building. The judge is contending that we do not have legal authority to do so, and that is fine. Our law department is saying, no, that order is not valid. I believe that, from my understanding of things, we have to provide ample space. It does not mean that necessarily the court can take over and limit our ability to do projects in buildings that we own. Okay, so just like if a landlord owned a piece of property and business that was in there, if there was upgrades that needed to be made to that building, the landlord would be allowed with proper notice to go in there and do that. As far as the building that the projects that were just done and we're not wanting redundancies, I will say, in my opinion, if there are any redundancies, it's not on the side of the administration, it's on the side of the court, because the court was fully aware of what the project was going to be, and they decided to go in anyways. And this is where that whole pissing match is coming in. I think what we have here is a situation where people aren't happy with certain decisions that were made in different meetings or different levels, so people just started doing what they wanted to do, and said we're going to fight it out. So, if there is a wasting of taxpayer dollars, I think it's because people did not communicate and couldn't find a common ground, whether that be Ms. Lester, the mayor, the judge, this council, whatever. We're all leaders in this community, and this kind of crap is just going to take everybody off throughout the whole city. They don't care one way or another if it's an LED light, if it's a whole new brain in his garage. All they see is a bunch of city officials acting poorly, and it's inexcusable. With that said, I make a motion that we amend ordinance number 74-2022, section 3, where it says court order JE number 38-2022, to read court order JE number 45-2022.
Second by Councilman Gray. Roll call on the amendment.
Excuse me, Councilman Lewis, is that 45 or 43? I have 43.
45.
45.
What you said, is that correct? 45 or 43?
Yeah, so there were actually 2 orders issued this time, but the corresponding order, previously 38, ordered the auditor to pay in the next 5 days the amount of $50,714. That was 38, 2022. 45, 2022 now refers to that new amount of 48,163. So it's the replacement to that 38, 2022. So I felt that made the most sense. So 45, 2022.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one more statement for the record.
I have a motion and
And a second. Roll call on the amendment.
Gregg,
Yes.
Howard Smith. Yes. Herb King,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Slutes,
Yes.
Sneed,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
and Kramer.
Yes.
9 yes to amend ordinance number 74, 2020, to reflect journal entry number 45, 2022.
Madam President, the Safety Service Director has something to do with this appropriation. I would entertain hearing it, but otherwise, can we just pick this up later? We've already drawn it out long enough. All right, thank you.
Ordinance number 74, 2020 has been amended.
I'd like to make a motion, we suspend the rules requiring 3 readings for ordinance number 74-2022 forward for a vote.
Second by Councilman Gray. Roll call for suspension.
Howard Smith. Yes. Herb King,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Slutes,
Yes.
Sneed,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kramer,
Yes.
and Gregg.
Yes.
9 yes for suspension.
And for passage.
Herb King,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Slutes,
Yes.
Sneed,
Yes.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kramer,
Yes.
Gregg,
Yes.
and Howard Smith. Yes. 9 yes for passage.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Help me on this one. Ordinance number 74, 2022, that didn't change. Has passed. Meeting adjourned.
Let's take 5 minutes and we'll start work session. Get some water, cool off. All right, let's go ahead and get this started. Start with our committees, community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do not have any new business, but I have pending 2 requests. The first is the zone request from multifamily residential district to general business district, and this includes the 4 parcels on Lincoln Way. There will be a public hearing on May 16th at 6 p.m. So I know it's up for 3rd reading, but I will be tabling this request until May 16th. Any questions regarding that request? The second item of old business is to allow the City of Massillon to enter into a capital improvement community park recreation conservation project pass-through grant agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. This is regarding the splash park at Reservoir. I believe from previous discussions that that grant that they're asking us to move forward with is a $500,000 grant. We also have $100,000 coming from the Robersons and $300,000 from the American Rescue Plan Project. There has been some discussion. Anyone want to open it up with questions, or would you like additional information from administration? I know numerous council members had questions, so I'll open it up at this time for questions. From anyone? Mr. Therick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the biggest questions I had is, we have a conceptual thing of this with a splash pad. By definition, I think you could stretch it into a lot of imagination what it could be. We have one architectural rendering that gave us kind of a floor plan, but some of the hardcore stuff, like what do you know, who's going if anybody's going to police it, if anybody's going to maintain it, how the water's going to be and when it's ever built, how we would care for it and what's it gonna cost. And we haven't had any enlightenment to that at all so far. That's my biggest concern right there.
Anyone else? Mr. Swoops?
I agree with Councilman Thayer. You know, I question the safety and security of the location that we were wanting to put this. Just a few weeks ago, there was damage done to the children's playground down there. And throughout my experience, throughout the years of working at the police department, I know that kids are running through there after dark. So I want to make sure that there's appropriate lighting. I know Steve Pedro said that there's going to be a 4-foot fence. I don't think that's big enough. Kids will climb that fence, and I feel like the splash pad will be out of service more than it will be in service. Simply because the geese, the security, and I can tell you that I'm sure there's police officers drive by there constantly, but when the police officers drive by, the kids see these headlights, they run up into the woods. So the police officers are never going to see them. So I feel like another location would be better. I even mentioned downtown. There's the city parking lot at Erie and North. I went by there today at 12:27 p.m. There were 5 cars parked in that parking lot. Me personally, I feel like that would be a better location. I feel like it's going to be more secure simply because there's more people driving by there. They're going to see kids down there if they're horsing around or whatever they're doing. They're going to call the police, and the police are right around the corner. I just feel like, we talk about revitalizing downtown. Parents are going to go down there with their kids. They're going to walk over and get their coffee, Tree My Coffee, eat dinner at Chloe's, Smiley's, or whatever other restaurant there is downtown. I just feel like that would be a good place for everybody. It's centrally located. What's that?
And no geese.
And no geese. So that's just my opinion on it, and I thank you.
Any other council members? Mr. Hurtado?
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. I agree, too, that I'm not totally in favor of the location at the Reservoir Park. When I mentioned that a week or two ago, somebody mentioned that the site is better for it because there's plumbing. Well, the plumbing consists of running a service line from wherever the water main is, and I think that that's going to be the issue wherever you look at it, no matter what the park, because plumbing just doesn't exist in grass under the ground every square inch of the city. So I don't think, we obviously have to look at where the water line is, but whether it's that park or a park on the west side or downtown for that matter, I don't think that there being plumbing at that site is worthy of making it the ideal site. I'm not opposed to the splash pad. I think it's a neat idea, but I do question the location of it moving forward. Thank you.
Would anyone from administration like to come up and address these concerns? I know over the past few work sessions, I believe we had Mr. Pedro here. We're hearing the same concerns over and over. Health and safety, the location, peace, and maintenance. And I do recall hearing that Green does have a splash pad, and I'm not asking to recreate the wheel, but has anyone started to gather information possibly from other locations to address some of our concerns? Would anyone from administration like to help us understand this a little bit better?
Good evening. I'm not going to speak to the maintenance issues. I don't know what those would be. That the parks, as part of this, when we move forward with this grant, seeking it, they said they would take on that responsibility for maintenance. So I know Steve will handle that, whatever that entails for the safety and the needs. I think those are issues that they have to deal with down the road, and I think they will. I don't think this facility is unique. There's regards to the location, I did speak with somebody from the state today, and unfortunately, the only way to move the location would be to go to the legislature and ask to have the location changed. And that is through the capital bill process. They are finalizing this year's capital bill as we speak. So I don't think that is an option at the current time. So we would have to wait 2 more years.
Mr. Thurman?
No disrespect meant at all, but I'd rather wait 2 years to do it right than throw money down the drain today and do it wrong. So I respectfully saying we have to have more information than what we have now. Thank you.
Let me make sure you're aware this has nothing, what you're dealing with tonight really has nothing to do with, it's just making sure we get the money. If we don't act quickly, we won't even get the money. So if you don't want $500,000, then the next time the budget capital bill comes around, they won't give it to us.
So is there a timeline where we have to use these dollars? So I understand this is an agreement to obtain that
We were supposed to have the
$500,000.
project done by the end of June of 2022. We can get extensions on it. I don't know if we can get extensions for another 4 years.
So they're expecting us to accept this money and have a splash pad built in
That's part of the contract.
60 days?
No, they will, once we accept the agreement, once we sign the agreement, that's all we're doing here, is signing the agreement. So the state can go to the controlling board down in Columbus and allocate money to give to us. So once that's in, then they'll ask for an extension for the project. I can't speak whether they'll extend it 4 years. I can't speak to that. I've been told, we're going to get additional funding here. We should get the announcement within the next couple of weeks, I'm pretty sure, on that. What that amount will be, I do not know. And then we'll have to go through the same process to sign the agreement for the second amount of money. But I don't know how many times we can go through this process, to be honest with you. We've never done it before. Last time we received it, was Duncan Plaza, and we spent that money.
Mr. Lewis?
So if we accept the money, can we still go to the legislator and ask for a change of location if necessary?
From my understanding, that's a possibility. I don't know all the details, but like I said, the person I spoke to today said that would be through the capital bill process, and that's being done as we speak. I don't think there's any way we can get a change of location. We don't even know what location we're changing it to. They're finalizing that as we speak right now.
But that, I think that's a great question. That's what, if we can accept, because I'm just going to speak, I could be wrong, but I'm not so sure anybody would necessarily be opposed to accepting the money as long as they still had an option of moving location. If you can verify that for us by Monday, then I don't see why we can't just move forward. But if by accepting the money, we're locking ourselves into location, that's where people's objection will come from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Anyone else? Thank you.
I'm not sure if it was when Mr. Peter was here, but I did talk to him separately. They were estimating initially at $35,000 to $45,000 yearly would be the cost of maintaining a splash pad. I don't know where he got his numbers, but that's what they were estimating. And he thought the Parks Board did not see a problem with them being able to manage and maintain it after that, as far as putting an attendant. I said it at our last work session, and I just want to say too that I am for the splash pads in the park. But I mean, it seems like it's kind of almost the same scenario. We get this brought to us. Every person on this council questioned location from the very first time we heard of this. And basically, it's like everything's already decided. I feel like it's almost either say yes or you lose money. But that's where it has to be. So I think it'd be great to answer that question that Mr. Lewis said, if the location could be changed. I wouldn't, I'm not going to block the money or block it from going there, but I think location-wise, it's the wrong location. I think you have geese, the trees with the water, Even back through there, I think safety is a huge concern. I've been looking at the parks and there are other options. Even like, I mean, this area here, if you look at this area, it's like 1.89 acres. Well, even Lawndale, it's a perfect open palette where people can't drive back and hide. That's almost a 3-acre lot. There are other options. They say, oh, we want kids to be able to ride their bikes, but then we say kids can't ride their bikes because they can't be there without a parent. So I think there's some confusion in there. So it doesn't really matter if it's at a community park or a neighborhood park, if kids can't be there unsupervised anyhow. I think the target area, it's a playground. It's not some huge waterworks. It's not, I think she said, approximately 60 by 75 feet fenced in. And so location-wise, there's water, there's plumbing, there's things everywhere, but when I look at safety, that seemed like the safest place to me, but I know we need work down there. But, yeah, it would be nice to know ahead of time, or maybe be included ahead of time, instead of just ask something, but, not be discussed with us.
The council is aware of this project. This isn't the first time they've seen it.
No, but from the very first time it was brought forth to us,
Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mrs. Creamer. I've never seen any plans until about, 2 weeks ago. They gave us the drawing outside of what was printed in the Independent. However, I will say, since the idea was first presented to us in council, I've been against the location. I'm still against the location, and if we're locking ourselves into location by accepting this money, then I'm all for the splash pad. It just doesn't belong in the reservoir, and I'm not going to be able to vote for this legislation if it's not going to be, if it's locked into the reservoir.
Mr. Hurricane.
Thank you, Mrs. Creamer. I was going to make these comments next week before we vote on this, but the time seems right to do it now. Mr. Bailey is correct. We did go through this exercise at Duncan Plaza. We're doing it now with the splash pad. I think it's unfair to council. I know it's unfair to you. You all can think how you want to think. But I really don't like being given a legislation request, saying pass it or leave it, with no real conversation from the legislative authority of the city. It amazes me that the General Assembly would accept requests from a municipality without proof of legislative approval. Kind of important. All these conversations that we've had the last couple of weeks should have been had prior to the act. I'm going to write an ordinance request or a resolution request for council in the upcoming weeks to basically say council needs to approve via one of those two means any capital budget request in the state of Ohio. We can have the conversations then, we can hash out the locations, hash out all this other stuff, because frankly this is unfair. We look like jerks if we don't vote for it, and we're voting for something that we have no say in. These are big ticket dollar items. So that is what I'm going to put forward in the next couple of weeks. We can debate it moving forward, but I think that this council really needs to have some say in what we're applying for. Thank you.
I have one more question. When the mayor presented this to us weeks back, she stated, when hearing that location was a concern with council, she stated she had to go back to the Roberson family and speak with them. Do you know if there has been a conversation with that family regarding a change in location?
I do not. And I think I can speak that the mayor and her State of the City address had a slide for the splash pad. I'm almost positive it wasn't the last State of the City. This has been going on for 2-3 years now. Yeah, so I mean, she's.
There was some concept, but we've never seen the actual sketch.
I think she had a picture of it in her.
It was presented.
It was presented. I mean, it's been presented. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but it's been.
Not the funding, but the project was presented to council 2 years ago.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Raley. That's all for community development.
Economic Development,
Nothing tonight.
Health, Welfare,
I have nothing.
Parks and Rec,
I have nothing.
Police and Fire,
Mr. Lewis, I have nothing.
Public Utilities. I have nothing. Rules and Courts,
Nothing from rules and courts tonight.
Streets.
Stops here. Just one. It's basically just an okay to allow the state to come through and update some signs that you don't read the request here. Prepare legislation to authorize the Director of Public Safety and Services to sign consent legislation with ODOT for the systematic sign upgrades on State Route 241. It's the limits. The rest of the information here bears out that the state bears all the funding requirements for it. It's on them. We're just giving them permission to operate in the city. So it does have emergency language so they can get these things moving. So is there any questions or that we have for administration on this or comments? Seeing none, I will ask for this to be put on Monday's agenda. And I believe that is all.
All right, thank you. Finance. The piece we have in front of us, you're going to see 4 different pieces, but they're all regarding the same thing. I'm going to skip straight to the piece that Ms. Barrero worked with the law director, and I think was also part of the suggestion that came out of the council last week, or 2 weeks ago, possibly. And the idea is to take the assistant law director position that was doing 20 hours a week, and that needed, they wanted to add insurance to make it more attractive to that person, because they're trying to hire. And so in order to do that, we would have to create the position, change / also have to amend our policy with the insurance companies. So it kind of became a little bit messy and opened up a can that most of us were hesitant to do so. So the cleanest resolution for all this would be just to make the assistant law director 30 hours. Now they do qualify for the insurance as our policy in the city is already, and it's only costing the law director approximately $14,000 more this year than he already budgeted for these type of operations. As part of the appropriation and the insurance cost, but he already has that in his budget. I think that's the cleanest. It gives the law director what they need. We don't have to change underlying policy in the city. I like the idea. Other members of finance, do you guys have any questions? Mr. Gray?
So we're creating a new position?
No, this position, I did ask that today. This position already exists. He's just filling it.
It's just what?
He's just filling it.
Filling.
And he needs additional funding because it wasn't filled before. So he'll need the additional funding in order to cover the cost.
So it existed but wasn't funded?
Correct.
But the funding is only partial from this year.
So he would have funded the 20 hours. Because now he's switching this to the 30-hour option, so he didn't have that extra 10 hours a week funded, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
I'll sign it and put it on. If anybody has any other questions, the auditor is here, the law director is here. But it seems to be the cleanest. So that means for finance, the other 3 pieces here, just ignore them. We'd like to make Mr. Bartos do exercises just to keep him on top of things. So we appreciate that, Mr. Bartos. Other than that,
So I had to clarify, we're gonna make it a 30-hour position and then he'll be able to have health insurance and dental and everything else. Okay. We had gotten that other email about possibly doing that or also establishing, did you see that email from Justin? Where he was requesting that the city of Massillon establish that part-time employees of the city of Massillon on positions requiring a specific degree of professional licensure, examples like architects, attorneys.
none of that will be.
We're not going to go that route at all for anyone else. This is the one. Okay.
One across the your levy, That, no. Oh, right. Yes.
Mr. Lewis, I just want to clarify, of the 5 legislation pieces we have in front of us, you're signing the one that's not stapled.
Right.
Thank you.
And then we do have a submission of necessary request to the Stark County Auditor without unnecessary delay to ensure the orderly and timely submission of a proposed levy to the Stark County Board of Elections by the filing deadline, and to ensure the generation of sufficient tax revenues for the purpose of maintenance and operation of a free public museum science for history. And you will see that we have language here related to the museum's levy. So the museum is wanting to have their levy back on the ballot, but they need to get us on board with it. It is a 1.5 replacement levy, to be clear. Any discussion there? Mr. Bartos, come on.
Mr. Lewis, we did have a representative from the museum who attended tonight, so I figured.
Oh, please speak. I'm
Want to be
sorry, you
aware.
just got through all this.
Yes, yeah, so you want to be aware and maybe hear from him.
Oh, it's always good to see government in action. I'm glad to be here. I think I know most of you. I'm David Schultz. I'm a trustee of the museum, and I've been a museum trustee on and off since 1980. So I was there when we moved from the little museum across the street in the library to our new museum, and now we've been through an expansion. So I hope you've all had a chance to be in the new museum, and one of the special additions in the new museum is the Paul Brown Tiger Football Museum with a full-time curator. So pretty big deal. Anyway, as Councilman Lewis said, we filed a request to be on the ballot in November for a 1.5 mil replacement levy. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have. You may not have any, but if you do, I can answer them. Yes, sir.
So by definition, this is a replacement, so this is what we have been paying.
No,
Exactly
it's
the
not.
same.
No, it's not. Replacement would reflect, in layman's terms, the cost of living. A renewal levy would be the same that you've been paying.
So this is a little higher?
It's a little higher, a little higher.
It takes some percent of the adjustment in your home value.
Yeah, basically, thank you. It's basically proportionate to everything that's increased in the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. We all know about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
But the museum, I'm obviously, my perspective is skewed somewhat. I think the museum is one of the best investments we have in this community. It underscores our quality of life, and when people not only want to move here, but people who live here, it's one of the real bonuses. And I see it, I've seen it for years. I've seen, the Stark County artists, I've seen the school art show, I've seen families come in there that have never set foot in the museum and suddenly discover what a wonderful asset they've been missing, and now their kids are going to classes. I'm probably preaching to the choir here when I talk about the museum, but it is one of our assets. So appreciate your support, and get out and vote in November. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just want to ask, with these funds, would this be continuing existing programs, adding new programs, or exhibits? What is the idea for that money?
Well, the levy constitutes the bulk of our budget. Okay? We've got some people who are pretty good grant writers, and depending on what grants are available, we can sometimes add new programs through grant writing. But as you can imagine, managing a not-for-profit in these times is a real trick. And I'd like to think that there are always some new programs. There's a new exhibit out there. But, some days when I'm sitting there looking at the budget and trying to figure out how we're gonna do this, it's like we're doing it with mirrors. Yeah, but in the end, we're a public institution, we're transparent, and hopefully we'll have some more excitement ahead of us in 2023 and beyond. I hope that's answering your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, most of our budget does come from the levy.
What is the current cost to our taxpayers, and what will be the new projected cost to our taxpayers?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't think I'm prepared to answer that tonight. I'm not a whiz on what levies and millies and all that equate to. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's, if people see it's only a small amount,
We'll end up having questions and answers in the newspaper, and we'll have it on our website, and it's something that between now and November, people will have. I think Mr. Thayer asked a key question, replacement levy or renewal. We need it, and to stay open. And by the way, we're going through accreditation again this year. We're one of 5% of the total museums in the United States that are accredited by the American Alliance of Museums. 5%. So that's a good housekeeping seal of approval. That means that, we're doing everything to the letter, and there is just, it says it all. We're doing it right. And I think that's something all of you can be proud of when you're supporting the museum, that, you've got an AAM accredited museum. I know there's some bigger museums I belong to and you're familiar with and you've been to. They're not AAM accredited. Their policies and practices don't support it. We do. Okay, no more preaching.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your support.
I've signed this and put it on. Anything else for finance tonight? All right, that is it. See you guys next week.